Hey, I'm Megan Piffner, and welcome to Mornings with Megan. Grab your coffee and let's have a combo. Marlene Handler is a licensed pelvic floor occupational therapist and founder of The Lifted Lotus, a holistic pelvic health practice in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. After facing her own pelvic floor challenges following the birth of her two children, Marlene went back to school to specialize in pelvic floor rehabilitation and has never looked back. She is dedicated to helping individuals overcome pelvic floor concerns, expand their body literacy, and improve their quality of life. With over a decade of experience as an occupational therapist, Marlene offers personalized holistic care tailored to support healing, balance, and overall well-being. She holds a Master's of Science in Occupational Therapy from NYU and has trained with some of the most respected names in the field, including the Herman and Wallace Institute, Lindsay Vestal of the Functional Pelvis, and Lynn Schult of the Institute of Birth Healing. She also holds certificates in sex and intimacy and trauma-focused care and serves on the board of the New York State Occupational Therapy Association, where she advocates for expanded access to pelvic health care. When she's not in the clinic, she's spending time with her kids, walking the Williamsburg waterfront, and doing a cold plunge. Welcome to the show, Marlene.
Thanks, Megan. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here today because I have wanted to have this conversation and cover this topic for so long, but I was waiting for the exact right person, and then we met. Shout out to Alexis from Plus Brooklyn, who created the Brooklyn Female Founders Community where we connected. It has been such an incredible group of women in support, and I am so glad that it exists.
Agreed.
So pelvic floor is a big topic. I think an often misunderstood topic and something that is so central to women going through perimenopause. What was the moment that you realized pelvic floor health was something that nobody was talking about, even amongst health practitioners? And why did that moment or moments call you to this work?
Such a good question. I think the moment that it really dawned on me that there wasn't support was after the birth of my second child. And I felt like I really had some symptoms and things going wrong that I didn't have answers to. And once I started talking about them to my friends, not my OB gynecologist, because I was being dismissed, but my friends started telling me that pelvic floor therapy was a practice area. And not only was it a practice area, but that I could study it as an occupational therapist. And that was a really big turning point in my trajectory after being an OT for years and working with children. I decided to go back into postgraduate training to specialize so that I could provide answers to women that I didn't have answers to for myself.
Going back to school after you've done all the things really makes a huge difference. And it means that it was something that you were super passionate about. And I just can't believe that as a practice OT that you were being dismissed, which means that if you with that knowledge base are being dismissed, then what happens to the rest of us who don't have that knowledge base? We just get sent home with you're
Precisely.
fine.
Yeah. I think about this all the time in terms of like access to care and equality and resources and knowledge. I mean, I know a lot of things and I have so many resources, and I was still being dismissed in 2018 by a very, very well-known OB gynecologist in New York City. So I think about this so much, and I will sit on the top of, the soapbox for probably the rest of my life, advocating for this and telling people about this and normalizing it and normalizing these conversations. Because if I didn't have answers, if I didn't have support, and I felt dismissed in 2018 in New York City, what is the rest of the world like? How are they managing? How are they navigating these things? They're feeling so alone. They're feeling ashamed. They're feeling isolated. They're feeling like they're broken. I hear that time and time again. I'm broken. Something is wrong with me. And
Yes,
it's so much of it is treatable, and so much of it is even preventable, right? If we have the right knowledge. But as age-old problem here, women have not been studied in healthcare until the 90s, especially female anatomy. And we are, really just seeing the effects of that now in 2026 in terms of the lack of access, the lack of data that we actually have to support what women are going through versus what men are going through.
Absolutely. And that data even narrows further when we take out women in general and then we laser focus down on perimenopause and menopause and that transition. And there's even fewer studies and fewer dollars going towards that research. And we're 51% of the population. You would think that someone would stand up and say, hey, maybe we should address this. So my work lives in the functional and integrative world, which is a root cause, whole person approach. If someone comes in with perimenopause symptoms like hot flashes, brain fog, gut issues, we're really going to dig into the origins. What is their metabolic health looking like? Are they sleeping? Are they pooping every day? It's not a take a supplement and we'll see you at 3 months later kind of work. When we met, I felt really connected with the way that you approached your work and the way that you talked about training and describing the way that you work with your clients felt very similar. You are an OT, not a PT. What does that distinction mean for how you approach this work?
I get asked this a lot. I would say probably every day. And I'm serious. And I think the way that I usually describe it is that OTs and PTs in pelvic health are so valuable as a collaborative team because we do foundationally look at different things. But the most simplified explanation is that our graduate level training is different. So physical therapists are looking at physical function, obviously, physical limitations, physical impairments. They're looking at the biomechanical body. How does a body function and what are the limitations? And they're looking at like orthopedic considerations. So how we move, how we function in our lives. OTs foundationally are very, 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 I would say, broad across the board. We're looking at fundamentally a biopsychosocial framework, which means biology, psychology, and how our social environment affects those other systems. So what do we need to do? What motivates us? How is our mental health? What does stress look like in our bodies? So the OT lens by default, by like foundational training, is very holistic in its approach because we're not just looking at a physical impairment and what do we need to do to get back to that activity. We're like, well, what motivates you? How do you sleep at night? What do you have to do during the day? Do you have to care for an aging parent and you have to care for a small child? Okay, well, we're probably going to have to look at things through that lens a little bit differently. Not that you're going to be doing 30 minutes of a home exercise plan every single day. We have to look at it realistically. What's realistic in the biopsychosocial model of their lives? And then once we get that graduate level training, different lens through assessment, then we go into postgraduate training in pelvic rehabilitation. And that looks very similar. It's a lot of the same accredited bodies. We're looking at the pelvic floor muscles, the pelvic floor functions. What does that impact? Quality of life. So we're looking at a lot of the same things, but our foundational framework is a bit different. And now, after practicing for years in pelvic health, I'm seeing a lot of overlap in PTs and OTs, bringing in that mental health component, bringing in that nervous system component, bringing in some knowledge of nutrition and lifestyle habits. So there is I would say a lot of crossover at this point in 2026. But fundamentally, our lens is a little bit different.
This reminds me very much of the RD versus CNS framework, which I think is very similar to you. I'm more like you, the CNS, and we do this whole person integrative approach where we're looking at what you were saying, biosocial, everything. How is your mental health affecting this? Do you have aging parents? Do you also have young children? That's all going to influence what you're able to do versus this more clinical, very specific, how are you digesting? How are you eating? Is your food absorbing? And which is important, but these other factors influence it and it kind of brings the lens further out and gives you a larger scope of, I guess, practice and also a greater toolbox, I think, and when you're thinking about how to affect change in a woman or a person, a client, and how you can actually help them move forward in what's going on with their body. I have this vague idea of the pelvic floor, sort of like a hammock that is supporting all of our internal organs in the abdominal area. And I know that it's connected to a lot of things like genitourinary syndrome, prolapse, painful sex, even TMJ. Can you explain to our peri friends what the pelvic floor is and what it does in the body?
Yeah. So it is precisely that. It is a hammock of muscles that sits at the base of our pelvis. And if you think about the bony structures of the pelvis, that we have the pubic bone in the front, we have the sacrum and the tailbone in the back. And then on the sides, we have the bottom of the hips, which are those little points on our tush called the sits bones. And all of those bony landmarks make up the structure that holds the pelvic floor muscles in place. So the pelvic floor muscles kind of spread throughout that diamond shaped bony structure in the pelvis. And it does support our organs. It's responsible for bladder, bowel, sexual health, all function, dysfunction, health, quality of life, and pregnancy, postpartum, and all the things that entails. It also serves as a pump from like within our body, from the lower extremities to the upper extremities. So it is like a system of muscles that pumps blood, lymphatic fluid from lower body to upper body. It's very much a support structure of our pelvis, a stabilizer of our pelvis, and very much integrated in sexual well-being, arousal, the ability to orgasm, and the ability to accept penetrative sex, whether that's fingers, toys, body parts.
All
So
of the things.
very, very, very important. We'll say very important to daily life.
You just named a whole bunch of things that make my daily life challenging or not challenging. So, in addition to that whole sexual wellness piece, you talked about bladder, you talked about bowel movements. Basically, that whole area being comfortable or uncomfortable can change how someone's day is going, positively or negatively. And when I think about stress and where people are holding it, and this is sort of the center of our body, I'm wondering how, if say the hammock is stressed and pulling and tight, or it's not doing what it's supposed to do, that seems like it can affect most of the systems in our body that are sitting in that area and could change how someone experiences quality of life. Is that true that that hammock not properly functioning is going to change how people are experiencing their day-to-day life?
100%. I mean, if you think about it, most people don't know what their pelvic floors are until they have dysfunction. And then that dysfunction is very, very impactful to their quality of life, their activities of daily living. That's really like an OT framework, as we really prioritize activities of daily living. And there's nothing more daily life impactful than bladder, bowel, and sexual health. I mean, if we can't get through a grocery store errand without peeing our pants, then obviously that's going to impact our day. If we can't pick up our children without pain or incontinence, we're going to obviously be very impacted in the roles that we have to maintain. The other side of that is, because I usually have a model to show, but the bladder, the uterus and the cervix and the rectum sit in a space of about this much room in the pelvic floor.
Tiny.
It's so tiny. So I usually say it's like about the size of 2 quarters. If you can't see my hands, it's about the size of 2 quarters sitting side by side. And we have bladder health, bowel health, sexual health, reproduction, pregnancy, delivery, and postpartum all happening in this tiny, tiny space. So often when something is impacted in the pelvic floor, it sort of throws everything off. I'll give an example. A lot of times somebody will come in and say, "Oh, I'm having urinary leakage." Okay, tell me more. I'm having urinary leakage when I do exercise, when I pick up my kid, when I go to the grocery store and pick up a heavy bag of groceries. Okay, tell me about your bowel habits. Oh, I never really thought about that. Yeah, I guess I feel like constipated and I strain. Okay, so there's some concerns, bowel habits. There's some concerns with the bladder. How does sex feel good? Are you having penetrative sex? No, it hurts when I have penetrative sex, kind of deeper inside. It's sort of, we start to get a bigger picture of maybe somebody's coming in for one specific thing. They feel like they just have stress incontinence or urinary leakage. And then we start to like uncover that there's a lot more to the story, but they've just sort of, maybe they don't know what the norms are, so they think that's normal. Maybe they don't know that that's even a concern. Maybe they're so used to it that it's just, they just sort of live with it. I mean, this is like what we do as women, is we just kind of grin and bear it. So because it exists, here's a little, I just saw this, my little model. This is a little pelvic model. I don't know if you can see it, but a lot of, you see how these are the two openings, like the rectum and the vagina, they exist in such a small space. And then you have all these other organs sitting on top that have to do really important things. And then you put overuse, demand, pregnancy, all these things onto those structures. And then, like if one thing goes sideways, it's likely that there's some symptoms of other systems as well.
This makes me think very much of the women moving from postpartum care into perimenopause space. And sorry, I say postpartum care, the lack of postpartum care, where they are dismissed, perhaps similar to your experience, where they come in and they have concerns and their doctor says, nope, everything is fine. And they're like, actually, it's not. And then that experience that you were just speaking of, where women just grit and bear it and they say, okay, well, I guess this is the rest of my life. I'm going to leak when I am trying to pick up my kiddo. I'm going to have painful sex, so I'm just not going to have it. I'm just going to be constipated. So much of perimenopause care in general feels very fractured. And I feel like you just described all of these systems coming together. And that makes me think of the client that I see who has been to the GI doc because she is constipated, who has been to the urologist because she's leaking or having urgency, who has been to the OB for painful periods. And rarely has anyone ever, actually, I can't think of a single person who has ever said to me, all of these doctors referred me to, or any of these doctors referred me to a pelvic floor therapist, or even mentioned the word pelvic floor health in these concerns. Why do you think that there is such a gap in connecting pelvic floor health in perimenopause in general?
It's wild. That's, I hear these stories all the time and every day. I think it starts with just the lack of care for women's health in general. I think that's the foundation of it is we haven't been studied long enough. Doctors don't have time to go to this extra trainings and go to workshops and learn about what's new and what data is showing. And the pelvic floor just hasn't been studied. I actually, in my practice as a clinician, see midwives, OB-gynecologists, and other pelvic floor therapists that haven't been trained on all the things pelvic floor related. So there is a huge gap in knowledge that starts from the academic level, that doctors do not understand the pelvic floor. And then they don't know that it's this amazing beneficial specialty that they can refer to that's likely going to solve for so many of these other fragmented things. Instead of going to a urologist for this and a GI doctor for this and a nutritionist for this, they could just see a pelvic floor therapist and probably have a lot of those symptoms resolved. But there isn't the training. At an academic level, there isn't training about the pelvic floor. As an OT 10, 11 years ago when I was in school, in my 3-year program, I had one lecture by one man who taught about the pelvic floor. He's still somebody that I hold in high regard. His name is Richard Sable, and he works at SUNY Downstate. But I went to NYU, and he was the only person that taught anything about the pelvic floor at all. And he taught us, he basically came in for one lecture in our geriatric class. So talking about the aging population and how urinary incontinence is the number one cause for people going into nursing home care. And it's completely treatable and preventable.
That breaks my heart.
It was one lecture 11 years ago. So there just isn't, this is why I know you mentioned the advocacy work that I do, but this is one of the reasons that I am so passionate about going into universities and colleges and doctors' offices and as many places as I can, fitness classes to talk about the pelvic floor, because there just isn't the awareness that this training and this specialty exists. because people are like, what are you going to do? What does that even mean? You know?
Right.
And it really is, it can be very beneficial for so many people. I hope that that's changing. The tides are changing a bit through social media, and the things that are trending on social media do get a lot of, they do get a lot of attention. And I would say perimenopause is having a moment. Pelvic health is having a moment. And I just hope that that momentum really continues.
I 100% agree. And I feel like this space just reverberates when you say that the training is lacking. It echoes what is happening with just general menopause care in doctors in general. Get one lecture if they get that. And of course, everyone is trying to change this and they're trying to change it and update the curriculums now that the WIH has come through and we've established that we're not killing people off with estrogen and progesterone. We're actually helping them. But it also makes me think of the opposite problem from what you were just talking about, which is the lack of information from a practitioner perspective. I think about the women who have such a hard time connecting symptoms to what's going on in their body. And so they come in and if they tell me about their cramps, their period, mood changes, anything that has to do with the uterus and the ovaries, their breasts even, they can connect that in their minds to PMS symptoms and then they can connect that to a perimenopause situation. But there is this very interesting disconnect when you start getting to painful sex and leaking and prolapse, and they don't immediately connect those dots. It's like there's some mental gymnastics that they have to do in order to get them there. Why do you think so many women assume that these challenges, leaking, painful sex, prolapse, are just normal aging that they have to accept rather than being related to these transitions, whether it be postpartum or perimenopause?
Precisely because it's been normalized for too long. Only one generation above me, my mother's generation, said that if you have babies, it's normal to pee your pants. I just watched a TV show last night, The Four Seasons. It's like Steve
Yes.
Carell and Tina
Yes.
Fey. And one of the girls is laughing really hard and she goes, "Oh my God, I just peed." It's normalized, even in 2026 in television, that people are peeing their pants when they laugh. It's normalized for my mom's generation to just, after you have babies, you pee your pants forever. I mean,
That just
these
is.
like painful sex, people don't talk about it. So then they don't know that it's not normal. So they think something is wrong with them. I hear these stories every day in my practice. I have clients that sit across and say, sex hurts and something is wrong with me and it's my fault.
Right, that
And
shame piece.
I have to pick my jaw up off the floor because how is this messaging still happening? And if I say, can we just pause? If sex hurts, what do you think you can do? They say, just stay quiet. I said, no, you stop. You just stop. You don't need my permission. You just stop and say, this hurts. Your body is sending a signal that something is wrong. You need to listen to it. And we've been conditioned for hundreds of years to not listen to our body, not listen to the signals, not listen to the messages. It's almost pathologized to listen to our bodies. Something is wrong. Oh, give them meds. Right? We've stopped being in tuned and embodied because we think that we're broken and it's normal for us to be broken. It's very sad. There's so much support out there. Just like you go to the nail salon for a manicure, just like you go to the grocery store to buy your groceries, just like you go to different places for different services. And the pelvic floor or something related to bladder, bowel, sexual health, there are people trained and specialized to help you in those areas of your life. And it's okay to just ask questions. Email. Is this normal? Is this something you can help me with? We're going to tell you the truth. If it's something we don't treat, we'll tell you. And if it's something we do treat, which it likely is, we're going to say, yes, here are some things you should know. And also we can help you with this.
I feel like the That whole conversation is so taboo, especially for our mother's generation. Bringing up the pain, bringing up the shame, bringing up the guilt, thinking it's their fault. Exactly as you said, so pathologized that it is something that they have to carry and shoulder and bear on their own. And I wonder how much of your work is tied into this big elephant in the room, this shame that is hanging out and putting pressure on women, just shame about what they're talking about, but even shame about pleasure or having pleasure or owning a vagina in general comes with an entire bag of shame that we are handed when we come out of the womb. And it's like, here you go, have fun. You have talked in the past about your own challenges around your pelvic floor issues and that caused you to withdraw from intimacy and exercise and friendships. And I wonder how you have used that now as a way to connect with or bring awareness to or support your clients who are also dealing with this shame connection.
I am a walking success story, a walking, living, breathing success story. So I went through all of these challenges. I did retreat in my life and stop doing things that were really meaningful to me. And then I got support. And then I went into pelvic floor therapy for a year. I was also very, very nervous to call, and I didn't even know what they were going to do. And I didn't know what I was going to say. And I was so nervous to even seek help. And then once I actually started going into courses in pelvic rehab only for myself and my own knowledge. And then once I realized that it was so valuable, I was like, oh, I have to give this to other people. But only through that journey did I feel confident enough, or I guess less intimidated and scared, to reach out to a pelvic floor therapist myself. And I ended up in pelvic floor therapy for a year. And it was transformational. I'm now a walking success story. I don't have pelvic pain. I don't have difficulty with orgasm or arousal. I don't have urinary leakage. I don't have any digestive issues. I feel very, very much pleasure and have a great sex life. And all the things that were really lacking when I was in my late 30s have all been resolved. And so that is I would say it's a humbling piece of information to share with clients. And I am very vulnerable about my own experiences and vocal and open. I've sat in that chair. I know how scary it is.
Before we go any further, I need to pause for a second. If you are listening to this and something landed, the leaking, the pain, the shame, the withdrawal from the things that you love, I want you to text this episode to one friend right now. Not post it, not share it to your story. Text it to one specific woman in your life who needs to hear this. Because Marlene just told us that so much of this is treatable and preventable. And the only reason women are not getting help is because nobody is talking about it. So let's talk about it. Text it. Okay, going back in.
I know how scary it is just to make that first phone call, just to say I need help. To me, it was like admitting defeat almost. And we don't want to do that. The generation that I'm from, we don't want to ask for help. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were asking the question about shame and how that's tied into all the work that I do, one new sort of evolution that I've been seeing is in my younger clients, the younger demographic, I'm not seeing that shame in the same way. I see a lot of empowered, embodied presence and comfort with talking about sexual health and what that looks like. And so there's something that's a little bit like hopeful to me about that like women are more informed. They are embracing their sexuality. They are saying when something is wrong. They're not in the generation that I'm from, grinning and bearing it, staying silent, bearing it all. And I think there's something that's very exciting that the younger generation is coming out a little bit more informed, a little bit less ashamed.
It's very hopeful, and it sparks some joy deep in my soul to know that they're not going to do the same thing, because I have very similar experiences to you with pelvic floor health and painful sex, and have gone to a pelvic floor therapist, and it was terrifying. I didn't know what it was. A doctor recommended it. They gave me no information about it. I went and was quite frankly horrified at what was happening. And there was nothing that happened without consent, but I did not understand what was happening, why it was happening, where things were. And of course, there could have been better communication on all sides of that picture. But I think that scared me away from it. And I put that away and continued to grin and bear a lot of pain and discomfort and problems for a very long time. And then eventually was able to revisit. But if you finally get the courage to reach out and ask for that help, which is, again, so hard for our generation, and then someone ignores you, gaslights you, or tells you that it's all in your head, it undermines all of that work that you just did to get to that moment. And then it almost makes it worse for her because then she's got to do it again. She's got to build up the courage again to get to that point where she can say, no, I do need help. And I understand that you aren't listening to me and I need to find another practitioner. But it's so hard to be heard in this climate when you have 7 minutes. That's where we're going to leave it for today, friends. I know. We are right in the thick of it. And I promise you, part 2 is worth the wait. Marlene just gave us so much: the origin story, the OT lens, the anatomy, the shame piece, and her own walking success story. If something landed for you today, write it down. And if you have been grinning and bearing it, leaking, painful sex, prolapse, constipation, anything in that area, I want you to hear Marlene's words. It is not normal. It is not your fault. And most of it is treatable and preventable. Part 2 drops next Wednesday, and we are getting into what actually happens in pelvic floor therapy session, how to navigate insurance, and 3 things Marlene wants every single one of you to do for your pelvic floor this week. See you next Wednesday morning.
At 202 North 4th Street in between Driggs and Roebling. We would love any inquiries or feedback or any curiosities. We're here for you.
If anything that we talked about today landed for you, the leaking, pain with sex, prolapse, constipation, the shame piece, please hear this. You do not have to live with this. It is not normal. And as Marlene let us know, most of these things are addressable and preventable. Everything will be linked in our show notes. Until next week, friends, take care of yourself, and I'll see you next Wednesday morning. Can you do me a favor? If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with one woman in your life who needs a different story about perimenopause. Our bodies didn't come with a user manual, and this perimenopause thing can feel confusing and lonely. But you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you are definitely not broken. And maybe someone in your life needs that reminder today. Let's spread the word and be kind to each other and ourselves. Now the legal bit. I'm a nutritionist, but I'm not your nutritionist. This podcast is for information and education only. No client relationship is formed. Always seek medical advice when necessary. I'll see you next Wednesday morning.